They want it gone, Officer Okafor, not the grave, the door.
Rosa had been a junior officer long enough to know that when Reyes started a morning by telling her what someone wanted, the someone was never in the room and the want was already in order.
Which door?
The one you built, the one a second Vask hold just tried to walk through.
She had built it 3 months and a season ago and had not, at the time, thought of it as a door. She had thought of it as a single grave kept from being unmade. RR001-6. Vask dead, recorded once as property recoverable, then re-recorded. By her, through a clause and a witness not, in a stubbornness she still did not fully recommend to herself, as something the Accord could not erase. She had defended it twice. Both times she had won by being, specifically, Rosa Okafor. The human the Tcharn had named, the witness the Vask held. The win had a shape, and the shape was her own. Now there was a filing on the public record wall that was not hers. Reyes walked her out to the hall and let the record wall make the case for him. It rose 4 stories along the registry hall's long side, glyphs crawling upward in 4 scripts as filings cleared and contested and stuck. The slow ozone smell of the scroll mechanism under everything. Sool record carts rolled their worn tracks across the floor. The fittings stood at 3 heights: human, Tcharn tall, Sool low. And the human height ones were scuffed palest, because humans were the newest and the busiest of the working tier here. Halfway up the wall, in the amber of an active line, a new filing was crawling.
Sevak hold, a trade-clade out past the Marak routes. They lost a tender and a crew in the same disputed band years before your wreck. Yesterday, they filed a site significance declaration on their own coordinates. Section 412-7 cited RR01 as the model.
They cited me as the model.
They cited what you did. There's a difference, and in about 2 days, nobody upstream is going to care about it.
She read the Sevak filing twice on her notebook before she trusted herself to understand it. It was clumsy, filed by a clade who had clearly studied her RR01 and copied its surface without its machinery, naming their dead and asking the Accord to mark, in the Accord's own record, that 6 lives had not been freight. The naming was right. The instrument under it was wrong. They had filed a bare Section 412.7 declaration the way she had in the beginning, before Clause 4 in the witness not and the standing citation had welded hers to the registry. A bare declaration was rescindable by anyone with a reason and a docket slot, and the Accord had found its reason fast. A strike motion was already lodged against the Sevak filing, not from a Sool recovery house this time, from the Accord registry's own clerks on the registry's own behalf, which Rosa had not known was a thing that could happen until she watched it happening.
The Accord doesn't care about Sevak hold's dead. The Accord cares that yours held. 1 grave is a grief. 2 graves filed the same way as a method, and the moment it becomes a method, every people the Accord ever failed has a form to fill out.
That was the danger laid flat. Rosa had thought, after the standing challenge, that RR001 was finished, shielded twice over, durable, done. She had not thought about the second filing because she had not thought of herself as having built anything that could be filed twice. She had thought she had saved a grave. She had instead demonstrated a route, and a route on a public record wall in front of every Accord watcher in the sector could be walked by anyone who could read it.
So, they strike Sevak, and the strike sets the precedent that the method is invalid, and the next time anyone cites RR001, the citation is dead on arrival.
Now you understand the order. They don't want me to defend Sevak hold. They want me to make your win un-citable. Quietly. Today, if I can. The instruction came down from people who do not put instructions in writing.
He said it without heat, the way he said most things. A man reading her a forecast, not a verdict. Which door is which? He had taught her that, her first week, along with the lines she had since used against him twice. The instrument doesn't care what you meant it for, only what it says. He looked at her this morning like a man hoping she had finally learned to walk through the door he was holding open instead of the one he wasn't.
The clean way out, Rosa, is to let RR001 be a thing that only worked because of you. A one-off, an anomaly with your name on it. Anomalies don't replicate. The registry can live with one of you. It cannot live with a procedure.
She went back to her desk and did the thing she did when she was afraid of the size of a problem, which was to make it small enough to write down. She uncapped the pen, chewed, she noticed the cap chewed to the bone, a habit she did not remember acquiring. And she put the problem in her notebook in 3 lines. 1. The Accord wants RR001 to be a favor. 2. A favor expires with the person it was done for. 3. I cannot be present at every filing forever. That 3rd line was the trap, and the answer both. Reyes was right that she could not defend Sci-Fi Hold the way she had defended her own grave. She could not be the Vask the Marak Hold held, and the human the Tcharn had named for every clade who came to the wall. Her standing was hers, non-transferable, a thing the Vask had pressed into her hand for life, and a thing the court had entered her into the record as, and neither of those traveled. If the method needed Rosa Okafor to work, then the method was exactly the anomaly the Accord wanted it to be, and they would strike it the moment she looked away. So the method could not need her. She read what she had won, twice, and made herself separate the parts. The first defense in the spring had used Clause 4, the rule that the reach could not rescind a filing where rescission would enter a false statement into a record the Accord read true. That part was not about her at all. That was about truth and about cross-readability, the treaty term that meant the Accord could not refuse to be able to read a reach filing. C08 in the margin of her own notebook, in her own shorthand. The Accord could decline to act on a thing. It could not decline to be able to read it, and it could not strike a thing for being true. The second defense, the standing challenge the season after, had used something else. There she had needed to be a party, not a clerk, and she had found party standing in the Tcharn naming. The court had entered her given name into the record, and to be named in a formal note for record was to be entered as a party. That part had been about her and only her. That was the part that did not travel. So the question was whether she could build the first part without the second, whether a filing could be made to carry its own standing, could be made true in a way the registry had to read, without depending on who exactly had filed it. She thought she could. She thought the answer was already in the code, the way the answer usually was, waiting in a clause nobody read for the use nobody intended. She found Vorm at the record wall an hour later, where Vorm was most days now, entering the slow procedural notes that were the working tier's whole job. The Tcharn stood 2 meters of narrow draped gray against the bright wall. The Accord gray overlay at the right shoulder, the plain copper procedural bracelet at the wrist, the procedural slate at the hip fold. The primary eye regarded her. The 2 recessed eyes watched the hall.
Officer Vorm, I need to ask you a procedural question, and I need you to answer it as the registry, not as a courtesy to me.
The pause came. Long, full wait, not silence, Vorm composing. Rosa had learned not to fill it.
The registry answers procedural questions. That is the registry's only generosity. Ask.
When the registry reads a filing, does it read who filed it, or does it read what the filing says?
Both. The registry reads the standing of the filer, and it reads the content. A thing entered by no one is no thing, however true. A true thing entered by a party stands. You learned this in the season past. You used it.
I used it as a person. I'm asking whether a filing can carry standing in itself, whether an instrument can be drafted so that the standing is in the instrument and not in the hand that holds the pen.
The pause this time was the longest she had ever stood through. Behind Vorm, the wall crawled. A Soul cart rolled past on its track, paper settling. Rosa held the silence the way she had been trained to, and felt it cost her.
You are asking whether a procedure can be a party to itself.
I'm asking whether the Accord has ever read one that was...
The accord is procedure that is a party to itself. It is the only such thing the accord has ever made. You are asking whether a human may make a second.
She had not, until that moment, understood that she was asking something enormous. She understood it now, in the flat register of a working tier officer naming the size of a thing without lifting its voice. And she felt the floor of the problem drop away under the small administrative ledge she had been standing on. She was not trying to save a grave. She was trying to teach the registry to read a doorway as a citizen.
The registry reads what is true and declines to read what is not. This has always been the Accord's only power. If you draft a thing that is true and that names its own standing in terms the registry must be able to read, the registry will read it. The registry cannot decline to read a thing for being true. That is Clause 4. It is also the oldest thing the Accord knows about itself.
Then Vorm did the thing Vorm had done 4 times now. The thing the whole sector watched her file for. The thing she had used as a weapon and still did not understand.
Officer Okafor, Rosa. You should know that I have been instructed to enter no note in this matter. The senior tier wishes the registry silent. I am telling you, as a procedural courtesy, and not as a note for record, that the silence is itself a reading. The court watches. It does not intervene. Make of that what a party makes of it.
The given name, 5th time. Identical construction, but not this time at the moment of entering a thing into the record. The court was meant to be silent, and Vorm had just told her so, and had used the name anyway, in the one register where it could not be a procedural act because no procedure was being performed. It was the pattern she had carried for 2 years, and feared for 2 years, and weaponized in the season past, and it still meant nothing she could declare, and everything she could not afford to ignore. The court watches, it does not intervene. The Tcharn were letting her use the naming standing to build a door, and their not stopping her was, she understood, a kind of holding it open. She went back to her desk and drafted for 11 hours. What she built was not a defensive CVAC hold, it was a form. She drafted it as a reach administrative instrument, a new sub-procedure under Section 412.7, the same site significance declaration she had repurposed in the beginning, and she keyed its standing not to the filer, but to the act it recorded. The instrument recognized a receiving, a completed cross-party act in which a people whose dead had been recorded as property petitioned to have the record corrected, and another party of standing acknowledged the receiving. The standing lived in the structure. Any clade could file it. Any party of accord standing could acknowledge it. And once acknowledged, it was true in the Clause 4 sense. A record the accord read true, which the registry could not strike for being true, no matter whose hand had held the pen. She made it readable. That was the whole trick in the end, and it was the same trick it had always been. The accord could not refuse to be able to read a reach filing, and so she wrote the standing into the readable layer itself. In the cross-readable terms the registry was treaty-bound to parse. She turned a thing she had done once, as herself, into a thing the registry had to be able to read forever, done by anyone. Reyes found the draft in the morning, because she filed it where he would, on the shared docket queue, with his name nowhere on it and hers on it everywhere.
I told you to make it un-citable.
You told me to make it a thing the registry could live with. The registry can't live with one of me, so I built a thing that isn't me. It's a procedure, the standing's in the structure. Anyone can file it. Strike CVAC holds bare declaration all you want. They'll refile under this, and so will the next clade and the one after.
You understand that you have just done the exact opposite of the order.
I made the order impossible to need. You can't make a precedent un-citable by striking the person who said it if the precedent doesn't run through a person anymore. It runs through Clause 4. They can't strike Clause 4. It's the oldest thing the Accord knows about itself.
He looked at her for a long time, and she watched him do the arithmetic she had watched him do twice before. The recalculation of what she was, from liability to something he had no column for.
The people upstream are going to read this and understand exactly what you did. You haven't hidden anything. Your name is on every line.
Good. I want it cited. A procedure with my name on it is harder to disappear than a person with my name on it. If they come for the instrument, they have to come for me in writing, on the wall where everyone can read it. I learned that from the Sul. Everything that's a transaction gets remembered.
The Marek Hold trade-clade came that afternoon. Rosa had not summoned them. One did not summon the Vask. But Tav of Marek Hold had a way of being present without registry when a thing the clade cared about was being unmade, and the clade cared about the route Rosa had built more than Rosa had let herself think about. Tav stood in a recessed gallery off the hall, multi-generation kin marks rust red at temple and jaw. 4 cord-knotted memorial tokens at the corners of the trade-clade harness, the inherited hull cutter at the hip. The other Marek Hold clade, others stood one step behind. Fewer tokens, less certain.
Sci-Fi Hold are not Marek Hold. We do not share a route, but we share a wreck band. And a thing done to their dead is a thing the Accord practiced first on ours. They came to the wall because you made a door. We came to see whether the door is yours, or whether it is a door.
It was, Rosa understood, the most direct question anyone had asked her all day, and the one she had spent 11 hours answering.
It was mine. I made it, not mine. That's the whole filing. If it's a door, you don't need me standing in it.
You understand what you give away. A thing that is yours, you can hold. A door that is anyone's, anyone may also try to close, and they will come for it. And you will not be able to put your body in it, the way you put your body in ours.
I know. I can't be the witness for everyone. I can only be the witness for you, so I built something that doesn't need a witness. It needs a truth and a reading. The Accord can't refuse to read a truth. That's not me. That's the oldest rule they have.
Tav was quiet a moment in the Vask way that was shorter than the Tcharn way and heavier.
You are still claimed by us. That does not change because you made a door for others. But hear it named. A witness held for one grief has made a road for griefs that are not hers to carry. The clades will say a human did this. Some will say it as thanks. Some will say it the way the Accord says interesting. You have made yourself a thing every dispossessed people in the reach of this registry now has reason to know the name of.
The strike motion against Sci-Fi Hold's bare declaration came up on the docket at the close of the cycle, and Rosa stood at the wall to watch it. The registry struck it, as predicted. A bare Section 412.7 declaration, filed by a clade with no party standing, swept clean in the reconciliations tide. The Sci-Fi Hold line on the wall went cold red and then went out. She did not move. Beside the struck line, already crawling up in amber, was the refiling. Sci-Fi Hold under her new instrument, the receiving procedure, the standing in the structure, the truth keyed to the readable layer. Filed not by Rosa, filed by Sci-Fi Hold themselves in the form she had built, the form that did not need her. The registry read it. She watched the clerk's strike motion lift, hesitate, and find nothing to grip. There was no person to call a clerk. There was no functionary to call no one. There was a true thing entered in terms the registry was treaty-bound to read, and Clause 4 said the registry could not strike a true thing for being true. The amber line crawled past the height where the cold red one had died, cleared, held. Vorm was at the wall, where Vorm was most evenings. The Tcharn entered no note. The senior tier had wished the registry silent, and the registry was silent, and the silence sat over the cleared amber line like a hand that would not be moved. The court watches. It does not intervene. Rosa had learned today that there were 2 kinds of not intervening, and that one of them was a door held open by a people too old and too careful to say out loud that they wanted it open. Reyes came to stand beside her, slate in hand, reading the wall the way he read everything.
It held.
It held.
You know what you've done. You've put a procedure on that wall that says, if the Accord ever failed your people, here is the form. Every dispossessed clade in the sector is going to read it. And the people who gave me the order this morning are going to read it too, and they are going to know exactly who wrote it. And there is now no version of this where you are a small officer doing small work.
I never wanted to be interesting.
I know, it's the worst thing a liaison officer can be. I'm going to go refile you again as a thing I have no column for. Go home, Rosa.
She did not go home. She stood at the wall a while longer, watching the Sci-Fi hold line hold its amber, watching the dead gap below it where the struck declaration had gone out, thinking about the size of what she could not now unmake. The door was a door. It was not hers anymore. That had been the entire point, and it was also the thing that frightened her, because a door anyone could walk through was a door she could no longer guard. She was about to turn away when the wall did something she had not seen it do. A third line began to crawl up beside the Sci-Fi hold one, another filing under her new procedure, the second one already within a single docket cycle, the instrument she had built being used again before she had even left the hall. She felt something that was almost pride and reached for her notebook to log the clade. She could not read the script. It was not Vask. It was not Sewell or Tcharn or Human. It was not one of the 4 scripts the record wall had crawled in for as long as she had stood before it. It was a 5th, in characters she had never seen, climbing the wall under the form she had written for the Vask, filed by someone she had never met, from somewhere the Accord had failed before she was born. The door was being used by someone she had never met. She had built it wide enough that she could no longer see who was on the other side.